Welcome back to the Fishing for Men podcast, a part of Fishing for Men Ministries. Fishing for Men exists to help equip men, build community, and live lives transformed by Christ. We're so grateful to have you with us today. I'm your host for this episode, Brandon, and with me in the studio today is...
Hey, y'all, it's Spencer.
Hey, it's George.
Hello, it's Cody.
Hey, y'all, it's Billy.
And today we're continuing our series on just taking a look at the Bible, doing a bit of a deeper dive below the surface. And last week we did the Old Testament, so naturally this week we're landing on the New Testament. Last week, as we were, our last episode, I should say, when we were looking at the Old Testament, we left off talking about how the Old Testament looks forward to the future with a promise that's laid out in Deuteronomy 34:10, where it says that the people were looking forward to a greater prophet than Moses that never quite showed up in the Old Testament. So I think we already know who the answer to that is. But before we dive into talking about all of that, I got a question for you guys. So what comes to mind when you think of the New Testament? Keep it broad, general. Say it, Cody.
Jesus.
There we go.
Salvation.
Salvation, okay.
Before I answer that question, if you're listening right now and you haven't listened to the one on the Old Testament, we actually encourage you to go do that because I think it's encouraging, or it's helpful because a lot of this builds on a lot of things that we talked about, and so
Yes, it does.
Encourage you to go back, maybe even the last two, as we started this series. As I think about what comes to mind for the New Testament, I'll be really cheeky here.
Uh-oh.
A nice God.
A nice God? Is that opposed to a not nice God?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what everybody says. The Old Testament's got the mad God in it.
I have a question for that. Did God ever change?
I mean, the answer for me is no. But
Okay.
if you do ever wonder, the answer is no to that question. But like really, as I think about the New Testament, I think the word that comes to mind is fulfillment.
Fulfillment. Okay. That's a good one. George, you got anything over there?
I like fulfillment. I kept thinking, I don't know, there's a sense of like hope.
Hope.
Like obviously in the Old Testament, you're waiting. There's like have that sense of waiting and hope. But now it's like, okay, we got the Savior and the King that we were waiting for. And now it's time to push forward.
Yeah.
Be hopeful about
Like that.
And wait again.
it. And waiting. Yeah. More hope.
And Paul.
Just Paul.
Thank you for giving him a shout out. I'm sure he'd appreciate that.
No, I think too, like one
There's
of the
Paul.
themes is, there's the fulfillment, but there's also the transfer of that promise now and the responsibility becoming, coming down to us, in the form of the disciples.
Do you think it wasn't on us before that?
No, absolutely. Well, I think about like the helper and that's kind of like
You mean like the Holy
Pentecost. Yeah. And all that.
Spirit? Okay. And things definitely changed.
Yeah. Also a new covenant.
New covenant. Is that does I wonder if covenant and testament have some like crossover?
I don't know.
The reason why I
have to
say
look into that.
The reason why I say that is because
Sure.
the Japanese word for New Testament, Old Testament literally is new promise, old promise. I don't know.
Hey, something for us. We got homework.
Okay, there you go.
Somebody get Tim Mackey on the phone.
Yeah.
Or Billy's iPad.
True that.
Okay.
Stay tuned for an answer to that one.
While Billy is looking that up, how about your guys? Anyone have a favorite book from the New Testament?
No favorites, huh?
Really? So last week I shared out of like the whole Bible, my Old Testament was Genesis, and then
Really?
okay, says the guy who missed the recording, right? And then in the New Testament I said Matthew and John. So two favorites, Matthew and John.
Mine's John also.
Oh, you like John? What do you like about John?
I like the portrayal that John has Jesus as God. There's the 42 I ams. And so it also, the way that the lady at the well is depicted in John 5, I think, John 4.
Does that scene come up in more than one gospel?
That's a great question.
I don't know. I'm honestly, because the way you said it, it made it sound like there was more than one version of it, and you liked that one.
Yeah,
I don't know.
can't remember.
Neither can I, because all those stories, you're like, which one,
Yeah,
which gospel is it in, and is it more than one? Anyone else got a favorite?
I have always been a fan, and it's probably recency bias coming out, but James and Hebrews, and I think it's just because of the practicality of the guidance in there, but also like the straightforwardness of this is what it means. Because I'm a little bit paint by numbers. You got to hit me over the head with it a couple times. James and Hebrews,
Just a couple. I got like 7 for me, maybe 10.
yeah.
Like I smacked me upside the face.
Yeah. So I just appreciate the directness of those, of this is what it looks like.
So answer to the first question is the lady at the well one. Sorry, second question. That only shows up in John.
Okay.
So I did look that one up too. That one was easier to find real quick.
Yeah.
We're still looking through.
You're still looking up the Testament
Yeah.
covenant.
Like a
thing.
really long answer. So
Uh-oh.
I'll have to come back.
Maybe we'll follow up on the next episode with an answer. To that.
As far as favorite book, I really like Acts. I think it's really awesome just to watch the church explode. And I totally get that it's not necessarily like a prescriptive and like, hey, you should go do this. I think there is some intentionality on why and how it happened, but I think there's a lot of things we can learn from that early church. And so just seeing how they did things is really, really cool to like just watch that, and you get to watch these things happen. And it says, and the numbers multiplied and multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. And so that's really cool. And then I really like Romans.
I was going to say that was your answer last episode. So
Yep. We're getting there.
okay. I was waiting for it. Are there any books in the New Testament that you just skip over every time? Because I think we have those in the Old Testament, probably, maybe.
Boy, I can take or leave Revelation.
You're like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
That's exactly what
Too hard to understand.
And it's not that I skip it every time. I've just avoided it entirely. Of like, I don't even know how to approach that.
Like, what does it all mean?
Yeah.
Well,
But I don't think I avoid any. There's lots of sometimes when I'm reading through it, this sounds really bad, but there's some short ones, so I feel accomplished when I read through a whole book.
Like 30 minutes.
like James.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Okay, knock that one out. Revelation, I don't avoid it, but I don't.
I would say the ones that like don't usually come to mind are things like Titus and Jude.
The back
Yeah.
back end, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like
I'm not-
Philemon, like I'm not like, you know what? That's my book to go to. And maybe that's just because I need to spend more time there.
And I don't quote it off those often
No,
either. Yeah.
no. I think often they're forgotten as books of the Bible. For being transparent.
Yeah.
Philemon.
Yeah.
Amen. Okay, so today I just want to kind of do something similar to what we did with the Old Testament. We'll talk a little bit about how the New Testament is structured, and then we're going to look at kind of the main themes of it with some Bible verses to back it up. So,
Ooh, covenant and testament are the same Greek word.
There we go.
Now the answer I got did translate into some. The Greek word is diatheke, diatheke.
Okay.
That is the Greek word. The answer to that does say, the distinguishment between like a covenant and a testament is that needs to come from like source of authority.
Okay.
That you're an heir to the covenant and you're not necessarily an heir to like a testament. And so there's a little bit of a difference in those. So
So then what does that mean for us calling it the New Testament
Yeah.
and Old Testament? Interesting. I don't know.
More questions.
More
So it
questions.
says, when translating the Old Testament into Greek, translators chose the word that connotated the self-determined action of the sovereign in making the covenant rather than a term carrying the idea of mutual agreement. They thought it might cause confusion, basically. So,
There we go.
yeah, probably some more digging to do than that for sure. But
Anyhow. back to
Brandon's
back to-
mind. The
I'm like-
gears are churning.
Yes. Okay. So structure of the New Testament. Did anyone else? I think I brought this up on the podcast before that like we sing Bible songs, New Testament, Old Testament song to memorize the books of the Bible. No, you're Cody. That was around when you were a kid. But anyway, so what do we start out with?
me to
the
sing
new-
it.
Oh,
You
is
don't
that
have to
the
sing. Well, you can
Genesis,
sing though.
Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, something
No.
like that. Okay.
My version was different. but
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, so what do we start off with the New Testament? What books do we?
The Gospels.
The Gospels, right? And what are the Gospels?
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Thank you for that.
With
I don't know
just
what that
such,
voice was.
I kind of sounded
With such
Billy a little bit,
confidence.
didn't I?
Yeah, so the Gospels are the good news. They talk about the birth, life, death, resurrection, and ascension of Christ.
but doesn't everybody have good news?
This is a special good news, Billy. Well, and the connotation of using the word gospel is because back during that time, like when Jesus was alive, the new Caesar would have his gospel. So he was going through the land proclaiming how he was going to make everything prosperous and great. You could think
Sure.
about it, the promises of a candidate for president on the campaign trail. He's making all these promises of what he's going to do. That
I don't think we refer to those as good news.
well,
In our con-
What's the word for it though? I've heard
Euangelion.
Yeah,
It's one of my
Euangelion.
favorite Greek words to say.
that's why Billy dug into that. He's like, I need it. I
Yep,
need the
here, we'll
chant.
find a way to slide it in there.
So there's very much a play on that, right? That the authors of the New Testament were using that word because they were saying, hey, we've got our own euangelion that's greater than what Caesar has to offer. But unlike the euangelion of the Caesars of the day, this one has lasted all these thousands of years later.
So I'm going to put something out there. More so for like, if you're listening, just as you start to read through these, think about this. If there are multiple gospels from a like before Jesus standpoint, like there's a Caesar gospel, air quotes, there's probably multiple from different rulers. I would venture to probably say that these are going to highly contest those in different ways and challenge them in many different ways as well. And so, something to think about as you like, if that's something that's common in that time, I think these four are probably doing something very specific to challenge what other people would have seen as these other good news.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Jesus's message specifically does that, but each of the authors of the different gospels have their own audience that they're targeting with a specific purpose. So like
Yep.
Matthew, for example, he's writing to a Jewish audience. He's interested in establishing that Jesus is the Messiah from a certain lineage. So he starts off his book with a lineage, which I think a lot of us just kind of like, okay, I get a freebie chapter. We're just like skimmed through it and we're like, okay, there's Jesus down at the end of it, right? But that had a purpose. Mark was writing to more of a Roman audience. He had a very specific purpose in the way that he did it. So in the time that they were written, they had a specific purpose for the audiences they were written to. For us today, I think we lose a lot of that context, but we still get kind of different vantage points of what was going on. Like earlier, we were like, the woman in the well, which one was that in? So we get different stories. And sometimes there's stories that overlap, but they're told slightly differently.
Oh my gosh, I can't talk.
Rah, 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 rah.
Were all four disciples of Jesus?
Luke,
Mark was a doctor now.
that was Luke.
Oh.
But I mean, were they one
One of the 12.
Matthew
Yeah.
and John were. Was Mark? I think he was.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it was just, I think that's right.
Well, but
But
Luke was
is proof. Yeah.
following what was going on. So the first kind of section of the New Testament is the Gospels. The next one is made up of a single book, and it's called the historical book, which was Acts. Billy kind of already gave us a little bit of a preview of that as he was sharing about why it's one of his favorite books. it gives kind of the story of how the early church got started and what that looked like, including the giving of the Holy Spirit in Pentecost, which I just found out today means 50.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
And side note, John or Mark was not a disciple.
He wasn't. Okay, I wasn't
but
sure.
he was
about
a companion to Peter and Paul.
that. Okay, that's right. So it was only Matthew and John.
Yeah.
So Pentecost means 50. They call it that because it happened 50 days after the resurrection of Jesus. And I believe Jesus was crucified on Passover, right? And so I believe that there was already a Jewish holiday going on at the time, if I remember correctly.
Isn't there a Jewish Pentecost?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're sure that's not a call out to the U.S. 50 states? God ordained.
Which, oh no. Oh no. What if we get more states? What are you going to do then? I was not expecting that. What's funny is I can't see you over my shoulder, so like these random comments are coming from out of nowhere.
Like brass.
I gotta love Spencer.
That's great.
Anyway, so Acts gives us the story of the church and the early missionary travels as the gospel spread. Then we go on to the next big chunk, which are all of the epistles which were written by Paul. He authored a lot of them. In case you're wondering what an epistle is, it's a letter written by early church leaders like Peter and Paul to address different theological issues and provide guidance to early believers and the church. He wrote 13 of them. These are, I think, other than the Gospels, these are the ones that we quote a lot, right? Like Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and so on. And then there's the general epistles that were written by other authors are some unknown, like Hebrews. So Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd, 3rd John, and Jude. And then Revelation, like we hinted at earlier,
Everybody's
it's
favorite book.
special. It's its own category. We don't know what to do with it, so just stick it over there by itself. Right? So that's kind of the overall structure. I think we're a lot more familiar with the New Testament and what it's made up of than the Old Testament. But why do you think God gave us 4 different gospel accounts instead of just one? Like, if all of the Bible is inspired by him, why these?
I think we touched on it a little bit of just the 4 different gospels and how all of them depict a specific view or maybe a specific side of Jesus's ministry that you don't see in Matthew, but you do get to see it in John or Luke as a bystander, not one of the 12. But also, I think a lot of the times people who are maybe exploring the idea of Jesus or Christianity in general will go, well, how do we even know that this is true? Or how do we believe this? And I think being able to have 4 separate accounts, primary accounts, that just cooperate off each other and also prove each other correct, gives us more ground to go, Jesus was real. Jesus died for me and was resurrected.
Yeah, so it helps provide validity in that sense. Mm-hmm. Which I don't have the stats on me, but when you talk about, how like some people contest that the Bible and whether Jesus was real and stuff. And I get why Jesus is controversial even today, but it's still like by and far leaps and bounds the most like documented ancient manuscript are, writings that we have compared to a lot of other ones by philosophers and whatnot from Jesus's era or even earlier. And those we don't question their validity, but this one we do. And because of the claim that it makes, right? And then also just outside of the Bible, there's so many other writings from the era of Jesus that mention him and talk about him that it's not just the Bible itself creating this character and putting together a story.
Sure. I think one really cool thing about the New Testament too, I was looking this up, it is one of, back to your point, like it's of what we have from like just original writings and just copies throughout history. There's more than 25,000 of them.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Which is just wild. Mm-hmm. There's 5,000 Greek. there's 10,000 Latin and then 9,000 of just other languages and stuff. And you get to see that more or less it didn't change over that time.
Yeah, that's one cool thing is like the earliest manuscripts that we had for a long time were hundreds of years later after Jesus's time. And then when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I think this is talking about the Old Testament, right? So when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were like Jesus's time or earlier, and they compared them to the ones that they found that were dated hundreds and hundreds of years later, the differences were like tiny. They're basically identical. So they had been copied down so exactly that it doesn't show, like 100%, but it basically proves that it didn't change. People weren't changing the story over time.
Yeah, it was, what it says here is they're 99.5%.
And 99.5%.
Yeah. I heard an interesting story, and I don't think this is for the New Testament, but it ties into the Dead Sea Scroll thing. I don't remember if we've mentioned it on here before, but I heard a story about how this actually happened. It was the Essenes, who are the people that sort of rejected Rome and ran off to the desert and said, "We're just not going to deal with them."
Yeah, they're like, we're gonna go out here and just wait for the Messiah to come. And
now, while that doesn't really lead into sort of the evangelistic aspect of our faith, the really cool thing is that a lot of the manuscripts that we have are because of what they did.
Yeah.
And what the really interesting part is that there's typically 4-ish guys in a room. One was writing or reading. There was another guy behind him verifying what he was reading. And then on the other end of the table was a guy writing and another guy verifying what he was writing.
And it was one letter at a time.
One letter at a time. And then whenever they got to the word God, all 4 of them would go outside, cleanse themselves, and then come back inside.
Jeez.
I bet there were some passages where they just like took a deep breath and they're like, okay. There's a lot of Yahwehs in here.
Sure. But like it's just cool to hear how much they appreciated scripture and just the intentionality to make sure that it gets passed down. And I think we've lost a little bit of that.
Yeah, because it's just on our phone. We can carry it anywhere with us. And that's not a bad thing per se, but the holiness of it, I think the weight of it is lost a little.
And I think to answer your question, Brandon, I think it's really cool. And part of the reason why I asked the question earlier, like, were all 4 of them just disciples? Well, no, they weren't. One guy wasn't even like within the group of Peter, or like, so one's, one
Mark
degree removed with Peter and Paul. But then you got this other guy over here, Luke, who's like, I'm a doctor and I'm just going to document everything, in doctor fashion and go through that. But you have people from different walks of life. They're not all Jews that are writing these. Some of them have parents who are, I think, is it Luke who is, I don't remember what the word is, where he has like a Jewish mom and like a Roman dad or something like that. There's a word for it and I don't remember what it is.
I don't know. I thought he was maybe possibly a convert to Judaism, but
he may, yeah. So I just think you get different perspectives that help, again, back to what George talked about, this validity in what they're saying. But I think the biggest intentionality behind it is they're trying to write to specific groups of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So they were trying to get their message out, their version of the gospel, to speak to people in the context of that audience's culture, so that it would make sense to them and speak something to them.
And a lot of people, like, I would say people outside of Christianity will look at those and be like, well, they're not in the same order, and this one doesn't have that, and this doesn't have that. Well, part of that is that context of like, who are they actually trying to write to, and what is the story that they're trying to tell? What's their quote unquote agenda? We don't like to talk about that sometimes with the Bible, but they had an agenda that they were trying to convey to a certain group of people. And that meant sometimes they re-swizzled some of the stories in them. That doesn't mean they did them incorrectly or in a fallible way, but it was in order to convey a specific message that they thought would land with that group of people.
Yeah, exactly. So next, let's dive into what are some of the major themes of the New Testament. And I believe it was Billy that said it earlier, but the first one I was going to bring up is fulfillment. So a lot of time spent in the New Testament talking about how Jesus is the promised Messiah. So we last episode talked a lot about there's kind of this building towards the promised Messiah or someone greater than Moses who was to come. So Jesus is like the climax of this story now, right? And we were talking a lot about how last time the two are connected. When you think about Jesus or the disciples or anyone in that context in that time, they didn't have the New Testament. It hadn't been written yet. So like all of their knowledge of God and his promises were from the Old Testament. So this is, even though there's like a 400-year gap between the actual writings of the last part of the Old Testament and the New Testament, in the history that God was writing, it's a continuation of it.
Talking about having to wait, man, 400 years.
Yeah. Like we wouldn't, you could have been born and died in that time period very easily and not gotten to see any of that, right? And not only that, but it was really everyone from basically the Garden of Eden up until Jesus that were waiting for that fulfillment in one way or another. So Jesus fulfilled that Old Testament story and the messianic prophecy. Sometimes he's referred to as the new Adam, the new Moses, or the son of David. Just to throw out one verse that kind of touches on that is Luke 24:44. It says, "Then he said to them," and this is Jesus speaking, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." So there Jesus is directly talking about his role coming to fulfill those. One of the interesting things I think about this is when we look at the New Testament, I mean, ultimately what happened to Jesus in the story?
Crucified.
They were crucified. And why was he crucified?
Claiming to be God.
Yeah, because he was claiming to be the Messiah, the Son of God. And they didn't like that. I mean, different groups of people didn't like it for different reasons. But one of the big things was Jesus didn't show up how like people expected him to. They thought that he was going to be this great warrior that came and rescued them from Rome because it made sense in their context at that time, right? They had these oppressive rulers over them. They thought he was going to show up and just save them out of that. And that's not what he did. It wasn't context specific. What Jesus came to do was more of like a global rescue mission to save all men from what was going on. And what's interesting about that? I sometimes wonder if we're not guilty of the same thing today ourselves with the second coming of Jesus. Like we have created in our mind like an idea of what that second coming should be and will look like. And so we're always looking at what's going on around us, trying to fit it into our context and say, oh, this is why he needs to come and this is what he's going to do.
Insert Revelation.
Yes.
And all of the controversy that sits in all the different, what I'll just call them, millennialisms.
Yes, the millennials, millennialism, pre-millennialism, I don't know. Isn't there an there's a bunch of millennialism. Have you guys ever heard of those?
This is the first time.
Like what is it? Like when is the rapture going to happen?
Yeah.
And this,
Is there a rapture? What is the
do the Christians get taken out
1,000-year
before?
reign look like? Like, are we in that now?
Yeah.
All that kind of, there's, I think there's like 4 major views, and I don't even know what they all are, honestly. I haven't spent a lot of time digging into the eschatology piece, but it's interesting.
It is.
But yeah, I wonder how much, we are like that. We're like, okay, I hold this view, and this is what I think is going to happen.
And the reason why I
And
bring
guess
that
what? He's going to not do any one of them.
I know. I'll be like, "No, that wasn't what I was expecting." Well, I bring that up because I think it's so easy when we look back. We have this kind of like hindsight's 2020 thing where we're like, how could you guys not get that? Like, it's so obvious. Just listen to what he's saying. And once the end comes, we'll be like, how could we have not like looked at these scriptures and gotten it? But
I do think it's important because whatever view you hold, whether you know it or not, is going to dictate how you live now.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to say, I'm not going to worry about that. But I think there is importance in having some sort of understanding of what your view is, because it is actually impacting the way you actually live your life.
And I think to that, not to say you just don't hold any view, but I also think holding whatever that view is with kind of open hands.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a tier 1
Yeah.
issue.
What do you mean by tier 1?
There are different tiers in what we'll call theological, I don't want to call them perspectives, but doctrines. There are tier 1. Those are what we call close-handed issues. Things like God is the Trinity. He is one, but he's distinct in 3 ways. Jesus is both both human and God.
There's only one God.
There's only one God. Salvation comes by faith through grace alone. Like, those are close-handed type of issues that if you don't believe one of those, and I don't know how many there actually are, but there's a decent chunk of them. Like, if you don't believe one of those, you're probably not a Christian. Like, that's just the cold, hard sort of punch in the face a little bit. And then there's a tier down, things like eschatology. That's the study of end times.
So all the millennialisms that you were just talking about.
So there are tier 2 issues, and then I've heard it described as either tier 3 or really just your opinions, which is going to be things like style of worship. What do you wear to church? Those types of things.
Yeah, and I think the tier 1, like you put out that there's these tier 1 issues, and it's like, who decided that? I think those are the ones that the church, the global church, the universal church, over the past 2,000 years has held to as like the core beliefs of Christianity.
Unfortunately, most of the divisions in the church came from the second tier issues, things like baptism and all those types
predestination, free will,
complementarianism or egalitarianism, which is women in leadership.
Okay, we're just dropping a whole bunch of topics we have no time to get into. People are probably scratching their heads, so let's keep it rolling along. Those could be future episodes. So fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. So thinking about that and thinking about our previous episode, how does understanding the Old Testament in light of that change how you read the New Testament?
I don't think you fully understand the New until you've spent time in the Old, because there's going to be, who's Moses? Who's David? If he's the new one, I got to go figure out who those people are first, before I can understand how Jesus is different from those.
But my Sunday school, those little flannel thingies, I brought those up last time. Those had stories of Moses and David in them. Is that not enough? I also knew about the flood from those.
Oh yeah,
and creation. Yeah, we had some Old Testament mixed in there.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Jonah as well.
Yeah. Second favorite Old Testament book for Brandon over there.
I like it. I don't know if it's number 2,
but I don't think you fully get, yes, you know the stories, and they're probably childized. Remember, they're sort of
I also read them as an adult too.
Yeah, meaning like the flood narrative. Let's take that one for example. The ending in every child's book is, they got off the ark and they lived happily ever after. What they don't talk about is what happens next. Is that Noah got drunk and things happened. And that's actually how it ends up ending. And they don't talk about David in that story where, he was a great warrior and he killed Goliath. They don't talk about, he saw this really amazing, beautiful woman and treated her really poorly and then killed her husband. That doesn't make it in the kids' books. And so we see a lot of the good things of those people. But we don't actually see the parts where they actually end up failing, meaning they can't be that Messiah that is coming.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else agree or disagree with Billy?
I think, yeah, I think it also just, when you fully understand the patterns of the Old Testament, I think that helps you appreciate, and it brings even more validity to the New Testament. When you can be aware of all of the hyperlinks between the New Testament back to the Old Testament, that for me helps bring validity and a deeper appreciation, which helps me feel more energy around the level of attention I pay to the New Testament when I know that there's truly that connection.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about like cultural references we make, where we'll bring up a movie or a line from a movie or something, and we assume that everyone knows, oh, he's talking about that, and it takes you to a certain, thought or feeling or memory, and that's those hyperlinks that you're talking about, right there, and it's filled with those. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode today. The discussion with the guys ended up going a little bit long in the New Testament, so we're going to go ahead and split this into 2 different episodes. We hope that you'll join us again next episode as we round out our talk on the New Testament and the key themes in it. Until then, we'd be super grateful if you jump over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from and leave us a review. It helps more listeners find us. You can also check us out online at fishingformenministries.org or over on Instagram and LinkedIn. Until next time.